There is a silent war that begins before the sun rises. It does not announce itself with noise or violence. It creeps in through thought, subtle, persistent, relentless. We wake up, and before our feet touch the ground, the mind has already begun its spiral. Regret, anticipation, fear, imagined conversations, imagined failures. The battle is already underway, and most people have already lost without realizing it. We call it thinking. But this is not thinking. This is surrender disguised as intelligence. This is the mind turning against itself, replaying what cannot be changed and rehearsing what has not yet happened. As Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "You suffer more in imagination than in reality." And yet we allow imagination to dominate our lives, to dictate our emotions, to paralyze our actions. We hand over control piece by piece until we no longer act. We only react. But there is another way to live, a way that does not eliminate thought but disciplines it, a way that does not suppress emotion but refuses to be ruled by it. It begins with a simple truth: not every thought deserves your attention, not every fear deserves your belief, and not every possibility deserves your energy. We are not here to silence the mind, we are here to command it. Because if we do not take control of our thoughts, they will take control of us. 1. We separate what is ours from what is not. The first act of discipline begins with division, not of the world, but of the mind. There are things within our control, and there are things outside of it. This is not a suggestion. It is the foundation of freedom. Epictetus made this distinction clear. Some things are up to us, and some things are not. And everything changes once we truly understand this. Overthinking thrives in confusion. It feeds on blurred lines. We worry about outcomes we cannot dictate, about opinions we cannot control, about events that have not yet happened and may never happen. We waste energy trying to influence what was never ours to influence. And in doing so, we neglect the one domain that is truly ours: our response. Each morning we must draw that line with precision. What can we control? Our actions, our judgments, our effort. What can we not control? The outcome, the past, other people. Once this line is drawn, something shifts. The mind begins to quiet, not because there is nothing to think about, but because there is clarity. Clarity is the enemy of overthinking. When we know what is ours, we stop chasing what is not. We stop negotiating with uncertainty. We stop trying to control the uncontrollable, and instead we direct all our energy inward, toward what can actually be shaped. This is where strength begins, not in eliminating problems, but in refusing to be consumed by those that are not ours to solve. 2. We act before the mind can spiral. The longer we sit with a thought, the more powerful it becomes. Overthinking is not immediate. It grows, it expands, it feeds on hesitation. The mind begins with a question, then builds a scenario, then constructs an entire reality out of uncertainty. And before we know it, we are trapped in something that does not exist. The antidote is movement. Not reckless action, but deliberate action. Seneca warned that we suffer more often in imagination than in reality, and the longer we delay, the more imagination fills the void. Action interrupts that cycle. It brings us back to reality. It grounds us. When a decision presents itself, we do not linger. We assess, we choose, and we move. Not because we are certain, but because certainty is not required. Waiting for certainty is the very thing that traps us. Action, even imperfect action, breaks the chain of endless thought. There is a discipline in moving forward despite doubt, a quiet defiance against the mind's demand for absolute clarity. Because clarity does not come from thinking more, it comes from doing. From engaging with reality instead of retreating into possibility. Each morning we remind ourselves hesitation is the breeding ground of anxiety. Movement is its destruction. 3. We refuse to trust every thought. Not every thought is true. This sounds simple, but it is rarely lived. We treat our thoughts as facts, as commands, as reflections of reality. But they are none of these things. They are interpretations, often flawed, often exaggerated, often driven by fear rather than truth. The mind can be a liar. It can distort. It can magnify problems and minimize strength. It can convince us that we are not ready, not capable, not enough. And if we do not question it, we will obey it. We must learn to step back and observe, to look at a thought and ask, is this useful? Is this true? Or is this simply noise? This separation between observer and thought is where power lies. Because once we see a thought as separate from ourselves, it loses its authority. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." That power begins with awareness, with the refusal to blindly accept every internal voice as truth. Overthinking collapses when thoughts are questioned, when they are examined instead of obeyed, when we become judges of our mind, not its servants. 4. We train the mind through repetition. Control is not a one-time decision, it is a daily practice. The mind does not become disciplined overnight. It must be trained like any other part of us, and training requires repetition. Each morning we return to the same principles. We remind ourselves of what matters. We rehearse the truths that keep us grounded. This is not weakness, it is preparation. Just as a warrior sharpens his blade before battle, we sharpen our mind before facing the day. We reflect on what we can control. We anticipate challenges. We prepare our response, not emotionally but rationally. We decide in advance how we will act when pressure comes, because pressure will come. Seneca spoke of premeditation, not as fear, but as readiness. By imagining difficulty, we remove its power to surprise us. And when it arrives, we are not shaken. We are prepared. Overthinking thrives in untrained minds, in minds that react instead of respond. But through repetition, through daily discipline, we reshape our patterns. We replace chaos with order, reaction with intention, and slowly the mind begins to obey. 5. We anchor ourselves in the present moment. Overthinking lives in two places, the past and the future. It replays what has already happened, or it constructs what might happen, but it rarely exists in the present, and that is why it feels so overwhelming. It pulls us away from reality. The present moment is the only place where we have power, the only place where action can occur, the only place where life is actually happening. And yet, it is the place we abandon most often. We must return to it, again and again, through focus, through attention, through deliberate awareness of what is in front of us. The task at hand, the breath, the step, the moment. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself constantly, confine yourself to the present, not because the past and future do not matter, but because they cannot be controlled. The present can. When we anchor ourselves here, something changes. The noise fades, the urgency disappears, the imagined threats lose their grip, because in the present there is only what is real, and what is real is almost always manageable. Overthinking cannot survive where presence is strong. We are not trying to become free from thought. That is not the goal. The goal is mastery, to think when it is useful and to stop when it is not, to act with clarity, to move with purpose, and to live without being enslaved by our own mind, because the mind will always produce thoughts. That is its nature. But whether those thoughts control us, or we control them, that is a choice we make every single morning. There was a man who spent years replaying a single mistake. Every morning, it was the first thing that entered his mind. A conversation he wished he had handled differently. A decision he wished he had reversed. He believed that by revisiting it enough times, he might somehow rewrite it. But the past is unmoved by effort. It does not respond to negotiation. And so, while his body moved forward through time, his mind remained anchored to something that no longer existed. His suffering did not come from the mistake itself, but from his refusal to release it. Contrast this with another man, one who also made mistakes, many of them, but each morning he faced them differently. He acknowledged them, learned from them, and then placed them where they belonged, behind him. He did not pretend they never happened. He simply refused to relive them endlessly. In doing so, he preserved his energy for what still could be shaped. This is the quiet discipline most people never master. Not the avoidance of error, but the refusal to let error define the present. There is a story often told about a philosopher who was publicly insulted in the marketplace. The crowd waited for his reaction. They expected anger, retaliation, something dramatic. Instead, he paused, listened, and continued walking as if nothing had happened. When asked later why he said nothing, he replied that he had not been harmed. Only words had been spoken. The insult had no power unless he chose to accept it, and so he chose not to. This is where most people fail. They do not distinguish between what happens and what it means. Someone speaks, and immediately the mind assigns meaning: disrespect, attack, threat, and from that meaning, emotion is born. But meaning is not given, it is created, and if it is created, it can be changed. The philosopher understood this. He did not control the words spoken to him, but he controlled the judgment he placed upon them, and that made all the difference. Think of the times we imagine conversations before they happen. We rehearse arguments, defend ourselves against accusations that have not been made, build entire dialogues in our head. By the time the real conversation occurs, we are already exhausted, already defensive, already trapped in a version of reality that never existed. And often, the real moment is far simpler than what we imagined. But we miss it because we are too busy responding to our own thoughts. There was a soldier who prepared for battle not by imagining victory but by accepting loss. Each morning he reminded himself that difficulty was inevitable, that plans would fail, that discomfort would come. And because he expected these things, they did not shake him. While others panicked when conditions changed, he adapted. While others froze in uncertainty, he moved forward. His strength did not come from confidence in outcomes, but from readiness for anything. We often believe overthinking makes us prepared, but it does the opposite. It fills the mind with endless scenarios, none of which are real. True preparation is simple. It is deciding who we will be, regardless of what happens. Calm or reactive, disciplined or scattered, focused or distracted. Once that decision is made, the need to overthink fades, because we are no longer trying to predict the future. We are preparing ourselves to meet it. There is also the example of the craftsman. Each day, he approaches his work with the same focus, the same intention. He does not obsess over how the final piece will be judged. He does not lose himself in thoughts of success or failure. He focuses on the process, the next cut, the next movement, the next step. And because his attention is fully placed on what he is doing, there is no space for overthinking to take root. This is a lesson we often overlook. Overthinking thrives in idle attention. When the mind is not anchored, it drifts, and where it drifts is rarely productive. But when attention is directed, fully, deliberately, there is no room for unnecessary thought. The mind becomes quiet, not because it has been silenced, but because it has been given something real to engage with. There was once a teacher who told his students that the mind is like a fire. Left unattended, it spreads, consuming everything in its path. But controlled, it becomes a tool. It provides warmth, light, direction. The problem is not the fire itself. It is the lack of discipline in managing it. Overthinking is what happens when the fire is allowed to run wild. We see this clearly in moments of pressure. Two people face the same situation. One spirals, overwhelmed by possibilities, paralyzed by fear. The other remains steady, focused only on what needs to be done. The difference is not intelligence, it is not experience, it is control. One has trained their mind to remain within boundaries, the other has not. And this training is built in small moments, in the decision to stop a thought before it expands, in the refusal to engage with every fear, in the discipline to return attention to the present. These moments seem insignificant, but they accumulate. Over time, they reshape the way we think, the way we respond, the way we live. There is no dramatic transformation, no sudden shift where the mind becomes perfectly controlled. It is gradual, quiet, almost unnoticed. But one day we realize something has changed. The thoughts still come, but they no longer dominate. The fears still appear, but they no longer control. The mind is still active, but it is no longer chaotic. And that is when we understand what it means to truly think. Not to be carried away by every idea, every fear, every possibility, but to choose, to direct, to command, to live with intention rather than reaction. Because in the end, the greatest battle is not external, it is internal, and it is fought not with force, but with discipline, not once, but every single day.